Our top focus at this hour, tensions between Russia and the West continue to remain high in the latest. Russia's defense minister has now accused US bombers of rehearsing a nuclear strike on Russia from two different directions earlier this month and complained that US planes had come within 20 kilometers of the Russian border. The Pentagon maintains that the drills adhere to international protocols and had been publicly announced at the time. But the accusation comes at a time when tensions remain high between Moscow and Washington over Ukraine. In between all of this, reports have emerged of US top General Mark Milley speaking to top Russian military officer Valery Gerasimov, though neither side has so far been forthcoming on what was discussed. The United States has voiced concerns about a possible Russian attack in Ukraine, a charge that the Kremlin has denied. Moscow in turn has accused the US, NATO and Ukraine of provocative behavior, alluding to the US arms supplies to Ukraine and NATO military exercises close to its borders. The defense minister made these comments in a video conference with his Chinese counterpart. Moscow has now turned to Beijing for support to counter Western pressure. Russia and China agreed at their meeting to set up cooperation between their armed forces when it came to military exercises and joint patrols. Meanwhile, the US has sent two of its refitted Coast Guard patrol boats to help the Ukrainian Navy. The two new boats are part of an assistance package to Ukraine that's been worth more than $2.5 billion since 2014, when Russia annexed the Crimea Peninsula from Ukraine. In fact, Ukraine got two similar vessels in 2019. And Ukraine sailors have already received extensive training on the vessels. Despite the conflict and aggressive posturing by Moscow, experts and analysts have said that they do not see Russia mounting a full-scale war against Ukraine anytime soon. And for more on this story, we are now being joined by Stuart Smith from Moscow. Stuart, thanks for joining us. Tell us, what do you make of these recent tensions that are now flaring up between Russia and the West, especially America, when it comes to Russia's defense minister's accusations that US bombers are now rehearsing a nuclear strike on Russia from two different directions earlier this month? Tell us more about this.
Yes, well, that exercise was called Global Thunder and is actually a pre-planned annual exercise where the United States military takes an opportunity to practice its nuclear deterrence capabilities. So Russia would have known that this was on the cards well in advance, but taken in the context of this broader escalating tensions, that's why these drills were interpreted more strongly than perhaps they usually would. So these were, of course, just training exercises. There's no indication and no claim that the United States is actually preparing for a nuclear attack on Russia. And these are exercises that happen every year. But as you said, when the situation between Ukraine and Russia, the United States and Russia is so tense, everyone's looking at signals for any signs of escalation. As you mentioned, the United States has patrol boats in the Black Sea. Russia this week has started its own naval drills in the Black Sea from the Crimean fleet, the Black Sea fleet based in Crimea, which is, of course, an area that Ukraine believes Russia should give back after Russia annexed it in 2014. Separately, you have this simmering conflict on the east of Ukraine with Russia-backed separatists, which Ukraine is still fighting an active daily war with on the east of the country. And then on top of that, Ukraine on its northern border is reinforcing its border with Belarus, both fearing that there could be migrants being sent across in the same way we've seen between Belarus and Poland, and also that potentially Russia could invade from the north. So it sent 8,500 troops up there. A very hot situation.
Absolutely. Now, Stuart, we also see a growing alliance between Russia and China. The two sides have agreed at a meeting to cooperate between their armed forces when it came to military exercises. How will this alliance affect the crisis at the border?
Well, this is indeed, as you said, at the moment, just words. And although there are drills held between Russia, ASEAN states, China in the east, recently we saw naval drills similar to that. We know that often Russia chooses to use its alliance with the CSTO countries, the post-Soviet states. Certainly when conducting military drills, as we saw around Afghanistan, the preferred allies for Russia are those Central Asian countries that have strong links. But China is an increasing partner when it comes to military affairs. I don't think the leaders would describe themselves as allies just yet, as Russia itself does have concerns about a growing military presence from China. China's military is certainly more well-funded than Russia's, although much newer. Russia is looking for support with its Central Asian neighbours. It has support from Belarus with these affairs, but pretty much any country west of the Russian border is at the moment part of NATO, that US-European alliance, countries which together will join and help each other out if they believe their country is under threat. Not included in that, significantly, is Ukraine. And although Ukraine is very worried about Russian incursion into its borders after Crimea in 2014, it's not a member of NATO, but NATO has assured Ukraine that it will provide things like ammunition, as we're seeing, and advice and funds.
Stuart, my final question for you on this story. Now, experts and analysts say that it is highly unlikely that Russia will mount a full-scale war against Ukraine anytime soon. But do you see this crisis escalating?
The concern is that there is so little trust between the United States, Ukraine and Russia that every other's military movements are second-guessed as potentially the start of some new conflict. So Russia says it's perfectly entitled to move troops within its borders close to Ukraine as it's its own territory. And Russia fears that with US backing, with ammunition and funds from the United States, it may decide to resolve the situation in eastern Ukraine itself, feeling bolstered by the support, which means Russia would then have to get involved. Ukraine is worried that Russia would take the first step and choose to escalate the conflict by moving into Ukraine to secure certain territory. So both sides worried that the other is going to make the first step and therefore very concerned about the other's increasing troop activity.
Stuart Smith, thank you so much for all those insights and thank you for joining us from Moscow at this hour on WION. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.